Klochko, and today our morning Tuesday live, and I just wanted to talk about sort of who's using whom. And yeah, please, if you have already your opinion, if you're thinking yourself about it, please let me know and we'll discuss it in the comments. I can see Adam here, okay. And who is the spoiled brat? Is it Putin or the Trump or even somebody else? Because there are so many participants, isn't it, in this sort of like using, not using, and who's benefiting more. Oh, hello, Jenny. Okay, so let's. Do you know the idea from this sort of like this discussion or this perspective came from the interview I mentioned yesterday. The Kit Kellogg had at the Yalta European Conference in Kiev, which was recently, which is YES conference organized. By Ukrainians oligarch Viktor Pinchuk, the son-in-law of the former president Leonid Kuchma. And Viktor Pinchuk actually deserves a separate story. Who is he? How he became, you know, this person. He is now one of the richest people in Ukraine. But I think I'll save it for another time, when we talk about Ukrainian richest, and we'll jump into this sort of who is using whom, Trump or Putin. And it can be both, isn't it? Because they have a quite long history of communication being on the global stage, and there's a lot of ways to speculate, to see, to analyze, and sort of look at it. Anyway. So the recent quote from General Keith Kellogg, US Special Envoy for Ukraine, President Trump, and he's a very popular person in Ukraine. And so his quote, this quote which inspired me to think about it. And he said, if I were advising anybody working with President Trump, do not put him in a position where he thinks he's been used. That's the worst place you can be with him. Oh, hello, Kev Bale. Hey, lots of love to Australia. So, if Keith Kellogg says it, that being used, Trump being used, if he sees it, if he thinks that's relevant to discuss or warn anybody, my question is, does President Trump feels he's been used? As we speak today, Trump called Russia the aggressor so far, explaining that only this week 8,000 Russian soldiers died. And he added, you lose the war if you're the aggressor. So what's your take? Do you think he's moving to the right side of history and he's gonna be less patient with President Putin, or we just need to wait till tomorrow and there will be change of heart? What do you think? So Trump and Putin really have long history exchanging compliments, meetings, speculating, and starting from Trump's visit from Moscow, I guess. Even when before he became president, or maybe we have to go even further when he was married to Ivana Trump, and when that's those people who speculate actually Trump is the asset of KGB, and that's when they started watching him and manipulating and pouring money into his business and actually creating Trump. By the way, if you're interested in the subject and would like to go further, check out on YouTube UK's Channel 4 documentary, Was Trump Manipulated? And it was sort of question. And this is quite interesting. And one of the speakers on this documentary, Fiona Hill, and she says arrogancy, because she's sort of like as a sort of from position of employing the asset, right, to making somebody a spy. She says arrogance is one of those things which easily manipulate. So please watch this documentary. I will leave in the comments the link to it, because it was quite interesting. You know, as a journalist, you can't really, until you have hard evidence and that somebody is spying, and you know, it's quite difficult to prove, but this quite interesting story goes far back, and with the dossier made by Chris Steele, and the election situation in the US. By the way, if you're new on this channel, just let you know, I have interview with Chris Steele, former MI6 officer, on this channel. Look further, there was last spring, we were talking about his experience in Russia and his experience in Ukraine and lots of other things. So he's amazing speaker and very interesting to watch. So check it out. So if I don't want to drag you all to that history, you know, as I mentioned, you can watch it in documentary, but recent things, you know, and while I was preparing for today's live, apparently Ukrainian diplomats on a big scale, they complaining the Russians and Putin particularly, they're using the vacuum of knowledge, the lack of knowledge in the White House, and to have the conversation, to have discussion with Putin, you really need to know the subject. You need to have the facts. You need to have the knowledge, the history of Russian war in Ukraine, and it, you know, it doesn't really even start in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, when Russia invaded the east of Ukraine, which you know, it's kind of like the basic knowledge, and you can't call like Charlie Kirk east of Ukraine historical Russian regions, because it's not true. Russians, it was Ukraine, and until the Soviets killed through Holodomor Ukrainians, and then they moved Russians citizens to live there, and this is how Russians appeared on these territories, because it's not Russian historical territory. Or in Crimea during the Soviet time, you know, the retired Soviet army officers, they were forbidden to settle down, for example, in Moscow, but they were advised to go and settle down in Crimea. And this is how the Russian-speaking Crimea appeared on the map. And because it's historically, it's Crimean Tatars, and Ukraine was given by Soviets in 50s by Khrushchev, just because the region was undeveloped. They had nothing. It was so deprived and depressed, and Ukrainians has just built the infrastructure, because geographically Crimea is connected with the mainland. So, by the way, we're discussing it with the Professor Rory Feenan on my podcast. We have two big interviews on there. So go, and he gives an amazing sort of expertise on the subject, and he also wrote the book The Blood of Others. Please go for it and just make your own conclusions. Don't get manipulated. So Ukrainian diplomats, they saying that you know, the current White House staff and those the decision makers, they just need to brush up on history and books and the knowledge and the facts. And you remember the scandal in the Oval Office when President Zelensky came to visit Trump, and when he invited Trump, J.D. Vance to go to Ukraine, J.D. Vance called it a propaganda tour. So he doesn't want to see with his own eyes. He doesn't want to dig the truth and see. He's just happy to sit in the Oval Office and say nonsense. Anyway, Ukrainian and European diplomats have repeatedly tried to explain the complexity of the conflict to the American leader, and however, they've come against a wall of ignorance. and in the White House administration. In turn, Putin skillfully exploits, that's actually a quote, skillfully exploits this vacuum of knowledge, imposing his own interpretations on Washington in the form of historical monologues and selected facts. You know, Putin is the very famous historian, and he's sort of saying things like, oh, Ukraine is the artificial state, it's never existed, Lenin made it up. He's forgetting the thousand years of history of Ukraine statehood. So while in Kiev they were printing books and they were developing, evolving and blah, 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 in Moscow there was just moors, there was nothing. There was people who were living in the forest. So really? One of the Western diplomats called US attitude towards Ukraine, according to Trump, messianic, his messiah. And moreover, according to him, the White House seems like they know everything and they don't want to hear anything. So that's can you how can you have discussion? How can you prove the point? How can you sort of like make the deal and negotiating the peace when people sort of like don't have basics? And so one example of uncertainty on this topic, you know, is just recent. Trump's advisor, Steve Witkoff, who went to Moscow as well, and he couldn't even clearly say which regions of Ukraine at the moment occupied by Russia. So what kind of negotiations or conversations you can have? I can't imagine. But you know, after his visit to Moscow, the lots of covering in Russian state media what he was having for breakfast. There was sort of Bilash, I think it's a meat pie, so certain Crimean Tatar traditional dish he was having, and they were discussing how much it cost and how he ate and blah 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 and all of that. I wish they were discussing his knowledge of history and understanding of the region and this tension between Ukraine and Russia and this conflict. And just give you a little spoiler, I'm preparing very interesting interview with Ukrainian intelligence officer, how Russians wanted to occupy Crimea in 90s. Because since Ukraine got independence, they were trying to invade, they were trying to grab, but they failed. So about this failed operation, special operation by Russians, you will have access very soon. We're working on that. And so another example how Putin used Trump to cancel his political isolation, because apparently it's really sanctions and political isolation that's what gets under Putin's skin. And he managed to have this meeting with Trump in Alaska. So you remember the humiliation of American soldiers, the red carpet, and strange mimics, the strange faces of President Putin, right? And we would think, oh, Trump looked in the eyes like he wanted, had conversation, and Trump's team, particularly Keith Kellogg, says President Biden didn't talk to Putin. We talk. It's important to have this conversation. So they did have conversation. Was it successful? Well, minding the fact they cancelled the planned lunch following the official meeting, probably it's not so successful, and probably it didn't go well for President Trump. Otherwise, he would carry on complimenting it. Anyway, complimenting Putin. So they cancel lunch, and Trump's recently called Russia aggressor and warned aggressor loses the war. Do you think he's heading to the right direction, or it's still sort of making with Trump's passion for making headlines? What do you think? Johnny says, yeah, Alaska, that's why he tariffed the shit out of the eggs, and nobody could afford any for the summit. Well, yeah. Red lines and the red carpets, Yorick. Yes, yes, very good point. Okay, so the summary. If we look from strategic geopolitical goals, who won, Putin or Trump? I think Putin, obviously, cancellation of isolation, and then he carried on in China. Has Putin, no, has Trump gained anything after the summit? No, I don't think so. Election advantage? Well, Putin definitely. Was it beneficial for Trump beforehand? I mean, if we reflect on the history, possibly. Undermine democracy. Yeah, I would agree on that. What do you think? Oh, right. So we have in the comments Russian supporters. Okay. Max Court says Putin clearly got more out of that meeting than Trump. That's how I feel. Interesting. Okay, personal image boost. I think they both did, and I think Trump also sort of getting more personal gain, and I would suspect he's getting sort of like his complimenting Putin and doing his advances towards Russia. I think there's also the money gain or the financial gain. We're doing business with Russians or with Putin. So that's interesting. Cable says Trump got a nice photo. Well, yeah, yeah, you can say that. And business benefit. Has Putin got any business benefit out of it? I'm not sure. What do you think? And Trump attempted. He did. I think we need more information for that, don't you think? So far, in my humble opinion, I think Putin sort of winning in terms of using Trump more, but Trump still can win this game, can he? He has more power, he has tariffs, he can impose stronger sanctions, he can stop actually this shadow fleet. Recently at this conference, at the YES conference in Ukraine, former politicians from France, from UK, Keith Kellogg was saying as well that sort of the oil state and oil money is the main source for the war. So if this is going to be stopped, so there's more success, because we all know that Putin won't stop, or Russians won't stop until they know they lose in the war. They lose in. Putin at the moment doesn't feel he's losing. I think he believes that he's still winning. Oh, Tommy says, good morning from Sweden. Morning, morning Sweden. Johnny says, Ukraine recently stopped half the shadow fleet by drone loading. Yes, it's been very successful. And I think there's more coming, because SBU and Ukraine's defense intelligence, they are really good at it, isn't it? They sort of like targeting the ammunition plants and factories, the oil depots. So I think they are doing well, and I think it's going to be even more, because the less oil supply, the less oil manufacturing, the weaker Russia, and the weaker they are, they need to be stopped, and Putin needs to be stopped. So that's how we're gonna sort of progress, right? And sort of condition Putin and his team to negotiations. Oh, by the way, did you realize that all Putin's sort of like nearest circle, they all 70 plus? So it feels like it's like a fancy or Kremlin retiring. I wish they retire. House, right? A home for elderly man. They're still kicking, but not for long. And I don't think he has 70 more years like he's hoping. Anyway, so Trump used Putin to increase his alpha image. Yeah, I wouldn't agree on that. It feels like the alpha man at the power at the moment, and it's sort of maybe because there's an appetite among the voters for it. I mean, obviously, the Zelensky, he's quite an alpha man, isn't he? And yes, I would suspect Trump is looking for the financial deals with Russians and Putin himself, and so score some political points, you know, especially among those American voters or American citizens who are so passionately feeling about the traditional values, you know, because in Russia they speculating on this topic a lot, like beyond that, and Russian Orthodox Church is a part of the state machine, and they sort of encouraging early pregnancies, lots of kids without providing any foundation, any sort of security, social security for young families or for mothers, you know, young people, and then discouraging getting for women education and inspiring the earlier you start having kids, the more you're going to be favorable among the you know, with the state politics, and it's also sort of supported by the celebrities, singers, and so on and so forth. So that's impossible, isn't it? Before you get your school education or university education and find out how you're gonna provide for yourself and for your future family, it just they're just making kids, give a birth, because we killed so many men. Now we need more to kill. And all those advances on Poland and Romania the other night, there was one drone and Romania had to take hello darling, hello. So, and you know, to protect himself. So we, as far as we discuss in this Trump, Putin, Zelensky, I think for today, for Tuesday, as a 16th of September, is looking sort of that Trump gravitating more into sort of the right way and having decent conversation. And there was announced yesterday that Trump and Zelensky are going to meet next week. So what do you think? Does Trump like Zelensky or respects him? Because some speculate that he isn't afraid Zelensky, but I don't think that's the situation. Anyway, I'm thinking about having a conversation with you guys about the beginning of the Third World War. Has it started? And I mean, we have the attributes like drones in Polish sky, drones in Romania. Both countries are NATO countries. UK announced that they sent in their fighter jets Tycoon to Poland. Yes, Tommy. Sweden sent in lots of money to Ukraine. It was announced, and thank you very much for supporting and helping Ukraine so much since the invasion. Endless gratitude. So and you know, in the UK is happening. Russia hasn't targeted it directly, but there are happening secret services things, and many experts saying the actual the Third World War is already in the UK. So we'll look on the subject further and think, and maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, we will talk about, is it enough attributes, tangible attributes, that we can actually say there's the beginning of the Third World War, and what politicians say about it. The current politicians, the former one, I mean those who's out of the position. Jenny says, no responding to drones on NATO airspace is going to emboldening Putin beyond our imagination. Yeah, I would agree with that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Especially I'm grateful those who join in the membership on my podcast channel. Very soon I will start members only lives and videos only for the members, to appreciate your support, because it means a lot. Oh, morning Canada, MS. Morning. Aha, we have interesting questions. Stalin or Hitler, who's using who? That's a very good question. Yes, it deserves another conversation, another discussions, and looking into facts. Do you know, in terms of Hitler and Stalin, just recently I discovered that during the Second World War died more Germans, I mean the civilians, than civilians in the UK, for example, when Germans were bombarding London. So at that time, the authorities were very cautious, were trying to protect civilians, while in Germany it wasn't the case. I think we need historian for that conversation. And there's other indicators. I won't give up everything, sort of like to have these parallels with the Second World War, compare Putin and Stalin. And there is something very interesting happening within the Putin's nearest circle, how he is following the steps of Stalin. So we'll look into that as well. Aha, we're having hello to Thailand. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining. Share your thoughts. Who do you think using whom? Putin using Trump, or Trump using Putin, and who benefits from more from them? Anyway, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and sending love whenever you are. Is it day, evening, or night there? And thank you for becoming members. And so share your thoughts. Share, because reading your thoughts, even if you watched it after the live is over, and because I'm checking, and that's my favorite thing to do. Anyway, I'm Jenny Klochko, and have a fantastic day. Please take care, and good luck to you today, and I hope you will have amazing, very lucky day. Take care, and see you tomorrow. Heroям Slava, Kay. Heroям Slava, and lots of love to Australia, Thailand, Canada, US, UK, whenever you are. I nearly forgot. Ukrainian Institute in London having screening of the films, and having the filmmakers this week. And tonight in French Institute, Andrei Kurkov, Ukrainian novelist, Ukrainian author, he's very famous, and he's having, he's meeting his readers or anybody willing to ask questions, and he writes about the war, not just novels. So his book in Waterstones, you can find it, Our Daily War, the book also you can see in sort of European politics, it's the sector, and tonight he's in French Institute. So please follow if you can join today and have your discussion or ask questions. Andrei Kurkov, I advise you. He was on the podcast. You can check. We talked about propaganda, Russian propaganda in the UK, in France, and what kind of narratives and how successful it is. So please check his interview on this podcast. Please check Andrei Kurkov on this podcast. Have a fantastic day. I'm Jenny Klochko, and thank you for watching. Bye. See you tomorrow.